I think if you think about it like a vibrational frequency, which sounds a little bit crazy, but it isn't. We're vibrational beings and we're electrical beings. And when you have this stress, it creates a lot of constriction and a lot of tightness in your system. And then you create these looping patterns of questioning and doubt and fear and concern, which is very normal and very human. And it is maybe the underlying thing that your body is talking to you. And this is part of working with your nervous system is a new way of learning to relate to your body and listen to what it's actually trying to tell you. And so in this circumstance where, you have this pain and it is your body's way of telling you that something is wrong and something is amiss.
Welcome to Beyond the Pain, the podcast that explores what it really takes to break free from chronic pain and reclaim your life. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon, and someone who's spent over 2 decades helping people get to the root cause of pain that no one else could explain. Whether you're dealing with long-term back issues, joint pain, nerve discomfort, or mysterious symptoms that just won't go away, this show is here to help you go deeper. Because beyond the pain, there's clarity, strength, and power waiting for you. Each week, we'll uncover the physical, emotional, biochemical, and energetic causes of pain and how to transform them. Let's dive deep into this week's episode. In this episode, I'm joined by holistic nutritionist Christine Ruch. Christine shares her own journey through chronic illness, including multiple autoimmune diagnoses and MS, and how that led her to explore holistic nutrition, nervous system regulation, and the deeper emotional and mental patterns that can influence pain and healing. We talk about how chronic stress and hypervigilance can amplify pain, why the nervous system plays such an important role in ongoing symptoms, and how the stories we tell ourselves can either reinforce suffering or support healing. Christine also shares why nourishing food, self-awareness, and learning to listen to the body are all such important parts of the healing process. So if you've ever wondered why pain can persist even when nothing obvious seems wrong, or why healing sometimes requires more than just treating the physical body, this is a conversation I think you'll find really valuable. So here's my conversation with Christine Ruch. Christine, welcome to Beyond the Pain. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So Christine, what I'd really like to do with people on the show, really to kick things off, is if you can share, your story, your journey, and how that led you to doing the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've been on a healing path my whole life, I think. That's sort of like I was born into this life of like having to heal from things and chose to overcome most of them. Well, all of them naturally, but it wasn't by design. It just sort of unfolded that way. Um, and then I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 20 years ago in 2006. And then a whole bunch of other diseases as well. Autoimmune diseases seem to like each other. They come in company. And that really began my journey into the natural wellness world, sort of accidentally. Um, I started with a simple thing like food elimination diet or whatever, thinking I was so sick when I was diagnosed. I really wanted to have a better handle on my health before I started taking conventional treatment. But then that path proved to be so powerful that then I went on to get a degree in holistic nutrition and then opened multiple food businesses, a restaurant, and 2 other locations and some food brands in Boulder, Colorado. And I did that for about 10 years. And I really was passionate, and I still am, about connecting people with like how imperative it is that your diet supports your health. And also trying to break through these barriers to entry insofar as like people thinking it's like woo woo or not for them, but for every person, like even the average person who doesn't really care as much about the quality of their food, getting them to really feel deeply nourished and also excited by the food that they're eating. Anyway, I did that for about 10 years, and then, the pandemic and a lot of other of those problems that came along with it, in my community. It was very difficult for restaurants, and not every
Mm,
restaurant, but for sure mine, I had a high quality food, and it was a whole bunch of different things. And I ended up closing my businesses suddenly, dramatically, and then what ensued from there was just like um a deep personal darkness, and it was definitely not what I wanted, and it unfolded in a really tragic way. But I say all that because that really led me to the work that I'm doing now,
mm,
and led me into really wanting to make meaning of what had happened, because on paper I was like living the life, I was living the dream, and I thought that I had everything, and I couldn't understand how these events transpired such that my life completely fell apart. And then, as luck would have it, I stumbled upon the path of two healers, and I went on this journey with them. And in that journey, I learned so much about how we really heal, and how the nervous system is a portal for so much. And and it completely changed my life in a permanent way. A lot of people who are looking for health outcomes will get to, and I lived this for 17 years, so I'm very familiar with it, where you start out strong and you gain a little bit of traction and you're excited about the path that you're on, but then it's sort of like, it kind of peters out a little bit. You kind of hit a plateau and you lose like your momentum, and then you began to be like a little bit discouraged about the path, or like the practitioner, or like, well, I thought I was doing the right things and now it's not working as well. And so you have doubt and all of that kind of stuff. And this work the change was fundamental and embodied and permanent, and so much freedom on the other side of, in a way that I never even knew was possible. So that inspired me to take my healing path away from food and really start working with people in this realm, and really bringing the conversation into why the nervous system is so important, and for everybody and for all health conditions, and what we can do to be empowered ourselves to start to make these connections and to take the nervous system very seriously.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the first people that I was introduced to on in that area was David Butler and
Hmm.
Lorimer Moseley, and their great book "Explain Pain." Um, that was my first sort of insight. I can't remember how long ago it was. Quite a while ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, this is going to be an interesting conversation. So, from your perspective, how does chronic stress and nervous system dysregulation contribute to the experience of ongoing pain?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about it like a vibrational frequency, which sounds a little bit crazy, but it isn't. We're vibrational beings and we're electrical beings. And when you have this stress, it creates a lot of constriction and a lot of tightness in your system. And then you create these looping patterns of questioning and doubt and fear and concern, which is very normal and very human. But then that creates more constriction and more stress on your body. And then you start contracting and contracting and contracting. And that then creates this tightness. And we think about ourselves, like, think about when you are really tight and you really want a great massage or something like that, and how much that tightness really affects all other areas. It could affect the way you breathe because you're so tight chested. It could affect the way you digest because you don't have any room to expand in your digestive tract. It can affect so many different ways that we think about physiologically, but it also affects us emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It affects all parts of our lives.
So how does that how does that contribute to the experience of ongoing pain?
I think that it amplifies it.
Mm,
It amplifies, and especially because we become very hypervigilant. This is definitely my experience as well. With MS, I was very hypervigilant about everything that would contribute to my symptoms and created a life that was very vigilant about avoidance and control in my environment, avoidance of all of these things. And then there was some fear, like if there was an accidental thing that I ate, or there was like a place that I was going where I wasn't really sure of the quality or the ingredients in any food, like a potluck or something like that. And so then between the fear and the hypervigilance and the control, then that just amplified all of my symptoms. I was like so vigilant for every symptom to appear. And of course they did.
mm.
And then that just would spiral me into another place of overthinking and overanalyzing and creating more fear and more hypervigilance.
Yeah, I mean, the guys I mentioned, Lorimer Moseley and David Butler, they often say that pain is a danger warning system. It's the way that your internal system is aware of danger on the outside. So what you're saying is the more stressed you are, the more vigilant you are, the more you're looking for danger, the more that nervous system is heightened, and therefore the more likely, because your nervous system's overloaded, the more likely you're going to feel pain. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. But I do agree with those two authors, and I apologize, I'm not familiar with that book, but it does make so much sense. And it is maybe the underlying thing that your body is talking to you. And this is part of working with your nervous system is a new way of learning to relate to your body and listen to what it's actually trying to tell you.
Mm,
And so in this circumstance where, you have this pain, and it is your body's way of telling you that something is wrong and something is amiss. And then we create all these stories, mental stories, and then all of these behaviors like hypervigilance. And then from hypervigilance, then you create all of these decisions and these stories about yourself and about your needs. That just compacts
mm,
the original, the original pain and the original signals from your body that they're trying to tell you. Does that make sense? And you're just
mm.
compounding the issue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to take a step back, just in case someone's listening or watching this and they're kind of confused about what we just said. If you think of, if you're walking, let's say you're walking down your garden path in bare feet and you don't see there's a piece of broken glass, right? As soon as your skin touches the first piece of broken glass, you want your nervous system to send some pain signals to your brain, right? So that you can lift the foot off before you do some real damage, right? So I think that analogy is a really helpful one for people to understand why we have pain, right? Because there's a great book called The Gift of Pain, and they talk about people with leprosy. Leprosy don't feel pain, so that's why they end up losing fingers and toes and things like that, or even nose, the nose, they can lose their nose and things like that because they don't feel pain, because they can stand by a fire and their hand could be in the fire and they don't know, right? So what a blessing it is to be notified every time we're putting ourselves in danger. But the issue is, and I think this is kind of what you was alluding to, is that in some people that warning system become oversensitized, right? So again, an analogy I use a lot, and apologies to my audience who've heard me say this a million times, but back in the 80s, if you drove down a road, especially if you're in a big vehicle, loads of car alarms would go off because they were too sensitive back then, right? No one was trying to steal your car. No one was breaking into cars, but all the car alarms were going off because they were too sensitive, right?
Yes.
So there are a lot of people that don't have any physical damage in their body, but they do feel pain, and the pain is real, right? So, I get a lot of people coming to me and they say, my doctors told me it's all in my head, or I need that, or they're trying to put me on antidepressants, or they want to send me to a psychotherapist, right? The pain is real. It's just maybe there isn't any physical damage to the body, but it's an oversensitized nervous system. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is super valuable because whether you are oversensitized to pain or undersensitized to pain, you're still like not necessarily seen in the medical community as having something to pay attention to, right? You're seeking care because of either of these things, and you're not being fully seen or addressed. And then that leads to a lot of other subconscious belief systems, like you're not being believed, or you're overly dramatic, or there's nothing wrong with you. Or it leads to coping mechanisms that are understandable because you're in pain or you don't feel the pain. And then you create these other coping mechanisms, and from those coping mechanisms, then you make other decisions and to protect yourself. And I think it's an example of how a lot of our self-knowing is not necessarily valued, but our intuition is everything. And that's why we are like seeking somebody to validate like the pain that we're feeling, or the obvious, like for me, I had a dysfunctional relationship with stress where I actually didn't feel it. And so I kept it so hidden and I kept it so suppressed that the only way it could express itself was with my MS symptoms, which is a disease of the nervous system. But then I tried to keep a tight clamp on my diet, and it was like it wasn't really what I need. You know what I mean? It was the root of it for me was that my dysfunctional way of dealing with like pain and stress and and the stories that I would tell myself about what that meant, you know?
Mm, yeah.
And so I think it's interesting. People are disempowered as it relates to seeking a lot of care.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I hear that a lot. My my first experience of realizing that pain is something to do with the mind, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I was young, maybe 8, 9, maybe 10. And I remember saying to myself, I had this saying in my head, it's only pain, right? Now, I was a very sporty kid. I mean, I'm a sporty old man now, but I still play sport now. But back then, it actually served quite a purpose because I played a lot of sport where you can get hurt, right? And I would just work through the pain, and from a sporting perspective, that was a good thing.
That's what you do.
Um, and I remember as a 10-year-old, I went away on a football camp or soccer camp, as you call it, with my best friend, and we were there for 5 days, and it was in the summertime, so the ground was really hard. And I remember I developed all these blisters on my feet, and I just kept going, right? Now, some people might say, oh, it's a blister, what big deal? Blisters really hurt, right? You can have one little blister in the wrong place and it really hurts. But anyway, I went 5 days. I think I might have had blister from day one. And I played the whole 5 days, and I didn't let it affect me. And I didn't know this, but my best friend, when I wasn't there, said to my parents, Leigh had all these blisters on his feet, and he kept going. I'd done it. I don't know how he'd done it. Right. So that was kind of like my first experience of understanding that your mind could play such a role in pain. I mean, the pain was there, but I could carry on. Now, obviously, as an adult, I'm a bit more, I'm a bit more, what's the right word? Commonsensical about it, because pain is there for a reason, right? So if I'm in pain now, I'm thinking, okay, why am I in pain? What's my body trying to tell me? But it's just interesting that I was at such a young age when I first realized your mind does play a role in certainly how you perceive pain. It was almost a way that my body said, okay, I'm in pain. I get it. I hear it. but I'm not going to let it stop me doing what I need to do.
Mhm.
I don't think that way now, by the way. If you've tried everything, stretching, physio, hands-on treatment, injections, and your pain still hasn't shifted, you're not alone. Most people try to fix pain from the outside when the real drivers are happening inside the body. Gut irritation, food sensitivities, nervous system overload, these often keep pain switched on. When you calm inflammation, the body can finally settle. The pain-free plate gives you 7 foods that help support that shift. Download your free guide at bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodycheck.co.uk/pain-free-plate. All right, back to the episode. Right.
Well, it almost becomes something that is like a badge of honor, right?
Mm,
That you can like withstand all of this pain and still thrive and still like achieve and get ahead. And so then it's like then we create kind of a culture around where that is valued and that is promoted and it's almost expected. Like if you want to be a hard worker, you want to be a high achiever, that's just part of it. You have to be willing to like have a high pain threshold.
mm. Yeah, I mean, if I was a rugby player or if I played, American football, that might be something that would serve a purpose, right?
Mhm.
Whilst I'm playing a match. After the match, okay, if I'm still in pain, I need to deal with it, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, I play tennis now, so there's no there's no need, it's not a contact sport, right?
Yeah.
So I've got no need for that in my life right now. And if I ever feel pain playing tennis, which is very rare, I very rarely feel pain playing tennis. But if I was to, even if I was in a competitive match, I wouldn't think, "Oh, I'm going to play through it." Right? So again, I've learned that the hard way a couple of times. I've put my shoulder out in a warm up and still tried to play the match. And yeah, I've learned that the hard way. That's a long time ago now, but um, for me, it's important to listen when your body's giving you a signal that something's not right. It's important to listen. And I feel most people don't have the knowledge to understand what the message is. Yeah, sometimes it's simple, right? You're in a car accident, your leg's hanging off. Okay, right? That's
Yep.
obvious, but quite
Yep.
often the pain is less obvious, right? So um another example, I woke up 12 years ago, 12 and a half years ago, and I was in bed and I couldn't get out of bed. I was thinking, oh, this isn't good. So I rolled out of bed. Thought, oh, I can't feel my left leg. This is definitely isn't good. And as someone that's dealt with lumbar spine pathology for a long period of time, I realised I'd done something to lumbar discs, and I even kind of knew. I I had an educated guess as to exactly what discs had herniated. It turns out I was right, but looking back, it was obvious to me based on my training. But I could read my body and I could say, I know what's happened. It's my L45 and L5S1 discs that, you know, they're not in a good way. Um, but then there are other things that are even less obvious than that. Some people, they might not have had any traumatic event. I mean, I didn't have a traumatic event for my bulging discs, but someone might get a pain somewhere in the body and then, a few weeks, months later, they've got pain somewhere else and then somewhere else and somewhere else. And it just adds up and adds up and adds up. But there's nothing to explain it. There was no event. They didn't fall off a bike. They weren't in a car accident. They didn't fall off a horse. They didn't get tackled in rugby. This pain's just come on. And for me, the important thing to try to understand is what is your body trying to tell you. But the way I look at the body, it's got different languages as well. So you've got to be multilingual to understand it. Um, I don't know if I know all the languages, but I know a few of them. And that's where I think someone that's in pain sometimes just needs help from someone like yourself or maybe someone like me who can help them, as I would put it, read the map of the body to try and help them learn what the message is from their nervous system, what it's trying to tell them.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree because, a lot of this too is like, very energetic, but it's also a lot of past trauma too. A lot of times, like, I think we're coming to a part in our culture and our society, but like, I'm sure, I don't know, maybe you, Lee, had like amazing parents, but I for sure was not having a conversation with my parents when I was younger, oh, well, about any of this. And I definitely had no way of like processing things that happened to me in my youth. Like, we never really talked about that stuff 50 years
Mm,
ago or 40 years ago, and or even longer. Even like it's only new in our society that we're starting to make these tentative connections between a trauma that happened to you in your youth, and it could be something like being bullied on the schoolyard, or it could be something that's a very big trauma, like an
mm,
abuse or a neglect or something like that. I mean, it doesn't really matter because your nervous system doesn't categorize like that. Your nervous system just holds the energy and frequency of this thing that got stuck in its system, and it doesn't like categorize like we do. That's a mental construct that we use to make meaning of things. But I think like we really need to have this like deeper respect and appreciation for all that our body does for us to keep us safe and to keep us functioning. And sometimes it just can't. Our nervous system is so wound up and it wants to release. That's the thing, is your nervous system is always looking for homeostasis, just like all parts of our body is.
mm,
And and if we don't give it an outlet and we don't facilitate that release, then that energy gets stuck in our body and it comes out in all kinds of other ways. And it could be in any number of ways. And that's where this idea of having someone like you or I who can help attune somebody to what their body is saying, because sometimes it's like learning a new language when you begin to learn and desire to trust the signals that your body is sending you, and a desire to not be in the mind to create these stories around things or go external to you to go a doctor hop, but actually to go deep inside to where the language begins, and
mm.
begin to learn the language of your body, and be supported by somebody who does know how to do that. And um and then when you go and find the doctor, then it's the right doctor with the right, who will help you, truly help you. It won't be chasing some sort of like solution, but
Mm,
the solution will be clear because you'll have been able to understand what it is that your body's asking you to
yeah,
do,
yeah,
you know?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
one thing that's big for me in the way that I work with people is nutrition. What would you say are some of the simple dietary shifts that people can make that support the body in reducing inflammation and discomfort?
Yeah, thank you. I just think it's about beginning to create a new relationship with food. I think our culture and our society creates so many opportunities for us to be really disconnected from the value of deep nourishment and true nourishment and what it does for our body. Um, and I think it's a matter of like calming yourself too, right? Like a lot of times we eat foods that are really highly inflammatory. And these are foods that we're just not designed to eat as humans, and they're not optimal for our nourishment and our well-being. So anything that's highly refined, and so anything that's highly refined and taken away from its original food source, right? So you look at something like a grain, and then you look at something like refined white bread or pastry products or something like that,
Mm,
and like the nutrition inherent in like the whole grain is far superior than something that you're getting at the local pastry shop. Or sugar is the same way. Sugar is a big culprit, but I think it's more like it's not bad that we have a sweet tooth. A lot of us struggle with a sweet tooth. And but it's biologically driven that we are like mother's milk is so sweet, right? And so we it's not that something that should be shamed or guilted, but rather the right type of sugars held in the right balance of the nutrients with it
Mm,
go a long way. And so it's like just staying away from like the refined white sugar and getting your sweets from other things that are more nutrient dense and help support it, like dates or honey and things like that, or even oils. You know, you think about the oil in our diet, oils are very inflammatory as well. And you think about how far an oil has come from its seed to its source and or its, so I think like when we stand in front of the grocery store aisle and we look at all the plastic bottles of like industrial oil,
mm,
well, that's not what nature intended, you know? But if you're snacking on nuts or you're snacking on olives or eating an avocado or a coconut, like that's, or even animal protein
mm,
or animal fat, like all of those are true inherent natural sources of fat. But so these are like the cornerstones are salt. Salt is another one that everybody likes to get all worked up about. And salt is also a very important nutrient. We
mm,
need it for all sorts of body functions. And but we've mistaken this idea of salt and everything has to be, sodium has to be counted, and I don't agree with that. I just think what they put in all the manufactured products and easily eaten products and at most restaurants and takeout shops are refined salt. It's highly refined and it's not in its true natural form like sea salt, where it's held by all of the nutrients of all of the other constituents of all the other minerals and everything else. Does that make sense? And
mm,
so that's why I always try to steer people to the whole food and the way nature brought it to us because nature
mm.
gives us everything that we need to thrive. And we just need to get closer to the way in which we find it in nature and and refine it as little as possible for us to be able to reap the benefits of that nutrients.
Yeah, I think we're on exactly the same page there. The one thing I'm guessing you would agree as well is that the more agrochemicals that are used to grow crops, or you know, obviously there's things like glyphosate. And I know it was banned in the UK initially, but I think it's everywhere now. Um,
Not in
you
the
know,
US.
yeah. Well, but I don't think it is banned anymore. Certainly not. It was banned from farming, but I think they've changed that
Yeah.
around because I think it's used to dry like wheat and other grains when they're harvested. Uh,
Yeah.
And
Go ahead, sorry.
initially, I don't know if you know, but glyphosate was initially registered as an antibiotic, right? So you're eating antibiotics every time you eat grain foods, basically. Um, but all the chemical fertilizers that they use, as well as the herbicides, um, with the animals, they pump them full of vaccines and antibiotics, right, which are toxic, which is in a way it's good for the farmer because it means that the animal's going to be fatter, which means they're going to make more money, right? Because it goes on weight. It doesn't go on, they don't put them on body fat analysis scales before they sell them, right? It just goes on weight. Um, and it's the same with humans. If you use antibiotics, you're more likely to be fat, right? Well, if you're eating an animal that was pumped full of antibiotics, what do you think you're eating, right? So um, again, it just goes back to, okay, how did our ancestors 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 years ago, how did they eat, right? Because they weren't suffering from all these modern diseases, but yet, the way that everything's mass produced food wise, it's causing a lot of problems. The other thing that can be problematic as well when it comes to pain is when people don't balance their blood sugar levels, because obviously that puts a lot of stress through the system and that's just going to charge everything up as well. So I think it's important that people pay attention to how they feel after they've eaten, because if they're, the classic one is people eat their lunch and then, if they're sitting in an office in the afternoon, they're like rocking backwards and forwards trying to stay awake, right? I'm sure most people have experienced that at some time. Um, But, if you're doing that, it's clear that you're not controlling your blood sugar levels. If your energy levels are going up and down, if you're not feeling satiated from your meals, like if you're eating a lot of food, but you're still hungry, that's telling you you're not really handling your blood sugar levels very well. Um, so they're quite important as well. Would you agree with that? Pain can feel hopeless when nothing seems to make a difference, but pain always has a cause. And when you find the cause, you can influence the outcome. I help people uncover the biomechanical, nutritional, emotional, and lifestyle factors keeping them stuck and guide them towards lasting relief. If you're ready to understand why you're in pain and what to do next, book a discovery call with me at bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. That's bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. Now, let's get back into the show.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, of course, I agree with all that. And I think I'd like to just add a few other things that I think are important as it relates to glyphosate and antibiotics and all of that in our food supply. It also is a huge gut destroyer.
Mm,
So it definitely destroys the lining of your gut, and then it leads to a lot of dysbiosis and leaky gut, which is undigested food getting absorbed into your bloodstream, which then triggers an immune response. And because your body doesn't like that. And so I think like there are multiple things that are wrong with that model, right? But the other thing that I think is important too, and I want to say this with all sincerity, because this is where I used to be and where I am now. The thing that happens when you and I start talking about our food supply and how messed up it is from start to finish.
mm,
And for a lot of people who are just new to their understanding of like the way in which our food has been so destroyed, it can lead to a lot of hypervigilance and fear. Like you're afraid
mm,
of everything, you're afraid of the food, and it creates this other sub layer of like constriction of fear and anger and all sorts of things like I can't do anything about this, or I'm afraid of everything I eat, or it creates all of these other emotional subsets, right? And what I like to do is actually not cater to that type of mindset, but really go back to this mindset about loving your body and loving yourself enough to honor what your body needs to thrive and survive and be in its fullness of life.
mm,
And you seek out those things because it's an act of self-love and it's an act of self-worth. And it's not something to be afraid of or angry about. It's like as soon as you catch yourself in that mindset where you're becoming hypervigilant or whatever those sub emotions are, pay attention to that and like really start to look at like that's not what I want is I don't want you to have um you eat 3 to 5 times a day. It's imperative that you have a good relationship with your nourishment
mm,
and not be resentful of it, not be afraid of it, not be like angry, oh, it takes me so long. Why have to drive? Now I have to drive and spend all this money at Whole Foods, like anger, resentment, like that's definitely not the right environment in which to nourish your body. Instead, being joyful that you get to drive down the country road to the farm, the next street, the next town over to get like natural, well raised animals to grace your dinner table, right? So I just really spend a lot of time trying to change the mindset around abundance and expansion and love and self respect and self worth as it relates to what we put in our body and not into this thing of resentment and anger
mm.
and fear and things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you know, I certainly wouldn't want to work with someone in pain and turn them into someone with an eating disorder, right? Which
Yeah,
is which is what could happen, right?
it
And
does.
you know, just swap one problem for another one. So, I mean, the way that I approach working with people, the first thing that when I'm working with someone, the first thing we do, we spend an hour goal setting. So we go into a lot of detail goal setting. And then once someone's got a clear vision of what they want to achieve, then we go through setting a series of core values, because then those core values are the way that they're going to live life in order to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So it's done from a very positive frame of mind. And the fact that I don't set the goals and I don't set the core values, I just facilitate their answers. And so if someone has a challenge, for me, it's just a question. Okay, so just remind me, what is it you want to achieve? What's your core value around that challenge that you're having? Okay, do we need to change the core value? Possibly, right? And what I always try and do with people is I take them as far as I feel they can do at that period of time. So for some people, it's tiny, tiny steps. For other people, it can be quite big leaps, depending on the person. And generally, what I find is the more energy someone has, the more able able to make big changes. The less energy someone has and the more stressed they are, the more they have to go slowly. So again, I think I'm on totally the same page as you. Um, but I think maybe we go about it in a different way, but we're doing the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I love like when you bring like the goals down to the values, because if you have goals without having like the value sits within you, it doesn't sit necessarily in your mind, it sits in your body. And the goal sits in your mind and the value sits in your body. And so I'm always trying to get people to connect with their body and kind of bypass the mind. I feel like in a lot of ways we're kind of like post knowledge and really like facilitating self wisdom and that part within your body that knows everything. And sometimes you have to quiet the mind to get to that part within yourself that knows everything that you need.
Mm,
And I agree with you too that sometimes when you are super overwhelmed and super stressed, like setting a goal can feel like unrealistic in a lot of ways because it's just like almost exhausting to think about a big goal. And when all you want to do is just sleep. And I work a lot with honoring people like in this idea of like there's nothing to fix. That like your body and all of its wisdom absolutely knows. And how about what if there's nothing wrong with you? And like your body is just talking to you and there's nothing to fix. We're just creating a space of safety and allowance and creating this self-love container and trust. And all of those things are foundational to allowing the communication from your body to start to come through and you to start making connections. Whether that's your value, like I thought this was my value, but then you realize over time, like, no, that's a value from my family. That's not actually my value.
mm,
Or like that's a value from a past life or a past job or a past relationship, but that's not what I value today. And so I think though, creating a space of like full allowance for all that is really important because a lot of people don't necessarily aren't necessarily held in a space where that is encouraged.
mm,
And it's okay. It's okay if we're just in this season that you just need to rest. And it's
mm,
okay. We're in the season where you don't actually need to think so much about all that. Like we're going to honor your body and honor you and what you know your body needs right now, which is rest
mm,
and not try to make it like this linear construct where, because healing isn't a linear path. We can force the healing outcome, but it's not what our nervous system really wants. Our nervous system is a vast, expansive system, and it's not one that tracks linearly, and it's more of like a vast spiral than it is like a coil, than it is like a linear path to wellness. And so I think a lot of times we in our culture create this linearity around the healing process. And it doesn't allow people to feel honored when they're discouraged if they feel like they got a setback.
mm,
Because That's just how it works, right? Sometimes we'll revisit old wounds a number of times before we actually are ready to be done with that wound, right? And it's like, oh, every time you revisit that old wound, it's not that you failed because that wound is still there, but your relationship with that wound changes as you heal, which just kind of is a exemplifies the spiral notion. And so I guess I try to hold a vaster space with less expectation and really more honing in on what that person's light body really wants to express at any given moment and time,
Mm,
because there's never anything wrong with that. It's all their own natural wisdom. And so I think sometimes it's stressful for people, at least the people that I work with, it's stressful to have like another thing that they have to do and that they're trying so hard. And the big sense of relief that comes when this idea that you don't have to do that to get the same results, you know?
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes complete sense. One of my favorite quotes that I use very often with my clients is that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback,
Mhm.
right?
Totally. Yeah.
And I probably use it the most when talking about nutrition. So obviously it's the thing that people do, what we probably eat more than most other things, right?
Yeah.
So, when I initially start working with clients, I do get them to do food diaries and get them to track how they respond afterwards.
Totally.
And I think because of our educational system, I think a lot of adults still feel like they're handing in their homework to the teacher, and I have to have a little conversation with them and say, look, this is an adult to adult relationship here. This isn't teacher pupil situation, right? I'm not going to give you a grade. There's not going to be any red marks on your diary. We're just going to go through. We're going to celebrate what you've done well. We're going to look at what you found challenging. And then from whatever you found challenging, we can come up with a solution on how you can maybe do better next time.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with that. And what I do too is, I have people do the food diary, but I also have them track bowel movements and mood
Mm,
and sleep. And all of not just your bowel movement, but like all of the pre and post like digestive signals that you get around those events. And what I try to encourage my clients is that it's really about tracking patterns. Because I find like a lot of people don't recognize that like they don't see necessarily that the thing that they ate influenced their mood, which influenced their sleep, which influenced their skin, which influenced their sense of like, you know, freedom in their body, and they don't track like all of these different things so much. They just go from food to from meal to meal to meal, what
mm,
did I eat wrong? And it's like, but when they add in all of these other like symptoms and their mood and things like that, then they start to create meaning from a pattern. So it's more of like a pattern and a meaning map than it is like a way to like shouldn't eat that, but a way for them to actually
mm.
see like the what happens in their whole system with
Yeah,
what they eat.
yeah, yeah. You're giving them the responsibility. You're empowering them to make the decision rather than you're telling them what they
Yeah,
should and shouldn't be doing. Right?
yeah,
So
because
that,
they wrote it all down. It's all right there.
yeah, it's like, well, I know if I eat this, I feel good. If I eat that, I don't feel good. Then it's their decision, right? You
Mhm.
know, I always share with my clients because there are certain foods that I like. I don't eat them very often. Like my favorite foods are Indian and Thai, right? They're my favorite cuisines. And almost always, if you go to a Thai restaurant, you're probably going to get seed oils. Almost always.
For sure.
Um, but I really love the food. But I don't have it very often. And sometimes I might have an Indian meal, and the next morning I might notice a little bit of feedback, as I would call it. but I'm making that decision consciously,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not doing it so frequently that it's having an effect on my health. I've got enough, what's the right word? I've got enough vitality for that to not knock me off course. But if I was doing that every week, it'd be a different story. And that's why in my value system, I probably eat, I don't know, you hear about the 80-20 rule. I'm probably 98-2, right? Most of the time. And I do that. The food's good anyway. I don't dislike the food. I don't miss anything. Um, but I know that's what makes me feel good. And occasionally if I eat out, I'll have something, I'll enjoy it. But my values will still be, I tend to avoid gluten if I'm out. Um, I might have the odd dessert here and there that's gluten free. Um, and I might end up in a food coma afterwards, but I enjoy it, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love what you said though. The whole theme throughout that is just your full permission, full allowance, and your trust in yourself. Like you trust yourself and what you eat and how you nourish yourself enough that tomorrow you're going to go back to your 90, like it's easy. It's easy because this is just who you are and this is just how you eat. And then that's when you go out to eat with friends and you decide to have a couple pints of beer or eat a pizza that you wouldn't normally or whatever it looks like. There's full allowance for that. There's no guilt, there's no shaming. There's no like even the next morning when you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's still something to laugh and celebrate. Like, thank God I don't
Mm.
live like that every day, but it was tasty. I mean, I think the relationship is different and that's what I hope to get people to is like where you are and where I am. I'm the exact same way. I have a very tight food values, but I'm also not like I was before, this fear and hypervigilance. It's much more around expansion and permission and allowance and trust in myself, trusting myself more than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually going for a lunch tomorrow with some fellow practitioners, and it'll be quite interesting to see what we eat tomorrow.
Yeah, right?
It will
Are
be
you
quite
gonna chuck it
interesting.
out the window?
Yeah, I mean, I'm suspecting I'll eat pretty clean tomorrow. I don't feel like I, need anything. But if there's a gluten-free chocolate brownie on the menu, I might.
Mhm.
Yeah, I might. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think we could probably talk about nutrition for another 3 or 4 hours.
Yes,
Um,
easy.
but moving on, if someone is feeling stuck in a constant state of fight or flight, what is the one practical tool that they can start using daily to help calm and regulate their nervous system? A pattern I constantly see in my clinic is that people blame their pain on the final movement they made, lifting something, twisting, slipping awkwardly. But the truth is, the body was already inflamed and stressed long before that moment. When you reduce inflammatory load from food, everything settles, joints move better, muscles relax, and pain becomes more cooperative. The Pain Free Plate shows you 7 foods that support that process. You can grab your copy at bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodycheck.co.uk/pain free plate. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, that's such a valuable thing because we're talking a lot in concepts and things like that, and people might recognize themselves in maybe any of the threads of the conversation we've had for the last hour. But I think what I also do, which might be a little bit different from you, is I don't really if somebody's coming to me, a lot of people come to me with chronic health conditions that they're trying to overcome. I don't need to know about your health conditions. I don't start there because those will fix themselves in my process. And I don't want to pay a lot of attention to that. But rather, what I do is I really am a firm believer in building emotional capacity first. Because I don't believe that we have a way as a society or a culture of teaching emotional capacity. And that is the capacity to hold the emotional state you are experiencing it. to hold it, not react from it, not ruminate, not create another story, not create a decision, not create an identity. No, that you just hold it because you are not your emotions. And you can actually create a capacity to allow any emotional state come through and feel it all without identifying with it, and then it leaves you. And the reason why this is important is our our disordered way of dealing with our emotions leads to stress, illness, disease, unhappiness, dissatisfaction across the board, period.
Mm,
And I think it's because we don't actually know how to hold space for our own emotions without being fear based or create an identity like I'm so anxious. That's not true. You're experiencing an anxiety induced moment, but you are
mm,
not anxious,
mm,
you know? Separating yourself from these emotions that you feel and recognize that we are emotional beings and we are designed to feel these energetics go through our body, but that doesn't have to define us.
mm,
And so when people start to build emotional capacity, then they have the ability to just sit with an emotion. And what I ask people to do is start for 30 seconds in any given moment, whether you're in the grocery store and you're at the sweets aisle and you're trying not to beat yourself up for wanting to grab like some like baked good off the shelf. It's like just sit for 30 seconds, hold that frustration, hold that guilt, hold that anger, hold that fear, whatever that is. And sit for 30 seconds. And during that 30 seconds, just repeating to yourself, there's nothing to fix. It's like there's nothing to fix. You can hold this state for 30 seconds and tell yourself there's nothing to fix, and then it'll go away. And you're
mm,
not that person, and you haven't made a decision. You haven't grabbed those like Twinkies off the shelf out of like, oh, I have to, you know what I mean?
mm,
And and what happens in this little tiny practice of building capacity, emotional capacity, is then you stop reacting to little things. The little things stop bothering you so much. You stop dwelling on things. There's all kinds of things that happen when you learn to hold and create emotional resiliency. And then you're able to actually have the capacity to deal with the bigger things that come through life because there's always the big things and the small things. And like just that alone, there's another thing that ends up happening is then you start to actually be able to listen to your body a lot better. A lot of us don't know how to listen to our body because we create stories around the thing that we feel because we're not used to holding that feeling and letting that feeling just be the feeling, period. And so then you start to listen to your body differently. So many things change, and your body starts to be grateful for your listening skills and starts to talk to you more. It's like a positive feedback loop. You begin to have faith and trust in the resiliency of your body. Like so many things happen. So that's where I start. Is just to try to get people to sit for 30 seconds and experience all the emotions and feel everything. Because then when the difficult things come up from the old stories that you have to clear from your system, then you have the capacity to hold that and not be afraid of of whatever that sensation is in your body. Does that make sense?
mm. Yeah, completely. Yeah, I guess the reason, or apart from the fact that we're not taught how to do that, um, I imagine another reason why people would perhaps find that challenging is because it's uncomfortable,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And again, I've got all these cheesy quotes that I use with my clients, and I'm sure my listeners are fed up with me saying them on this show as well. But
Yeah,
you know, I say to my clients, I don't think anyone's ever achieved anything amazing whilst in their comfort zone,
yeah, it's true.
right? So if you want to achieve anything worthwhile, get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And if you want to get out of pain, and one of the ways is to stop being in a fight or flight state constantly, then perhaps open up your opportunities to sitting with certain emotions and being uncomfortable. Again, another thing that I was taught years and years ago, for those that are listening, what I'm doing right now is I'm clenching my fists, so one hand across the other, but I'm changing from one to the other. Now, if you say to someone, clench your hands together, people will always do it the same way. So it might be their left thumb is closest to them, right? Then if you say do it the other way, you watch their face and they go, oh, that feels really strange. But then if you get them to do that and just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, and they do it and they keep doing it and they keep doing it, and then you say, right, now just clasp hands. You say, is that the way you normally do it? And some people go, oh, I can't remember, right? And that's just a physical way of showing how if something's uncomfortable, if you just keep doing it, it becomes comfortable, right? So I would imagine if someone, let's say, they're anxious about something, right? Let's say, I don't know, they're stuck in their car, they want to get home, they're stuck in traffic, they're getting really anxious, they want to get home by a certain time, whatever. If you just get comfortable saying, oh, that's interesting, I'm experiencing some anxiety right now, right?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
as you said, sit with it for 30 seconds. I would imagine it would begin to dissolve at some point.
Yeah, it does. It's pretty astonishing, actually.
Yeah.
And I think what you said is so true too. I think this is kind of a consequence of our like fix me culture and our convenience culture, and everything has to be fast, and nobody wants to be triggered. I don't feel safe. Like these are some of these tag words in our
Mm,
society right now. And we don't realize that we create our own safety within. And that starts with having the capacity to hold your emotional state. And it's also the ability to have a rich emotional landscape where you can experience any range of emotions without it causing you to be thrown off kilter, right? And I also think that what you said too about like the discomfort and the fear, like we're not born into this world without never being able to confront fear or adversity or challenge. Like it just that's not that's not what we're here for. Like you can't have everything beautiful without any like the bitter and the sweet. Like you have to have both. And always I know, and I've lived this, that like life is always better on the other side of pain.
mm,
It's always better. And you will never regret actually, because not only will you have the gift of having gone through that experience, but you have all of these other gifts that you never could have imagined that go along with it, like self-trust and self-love and and awe in what you've been able to accomplish. And all of those things, like you can't buy that. And it's part of what makes the human experience rich and worth living. Um, and so, yeah, I just love to encourage people that we can do hard things,
mm,
and that life isn't supposed to be easy. And maybe all of your pains, whether it's an illness, a diagnosis, relationships, physical pain, are all here for a reason to teach us a lesson.
mm,
And trying to avoid it and mask it and take a pill for it and all of those things isn't actually taking the pain away.
mm.
It's inviting us to actually face the fear and face the pain
Yeah.
and walk through the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. The other analogy that's similar to that is, you got your engine warning light on the dashboard of your car, right? It's warning you that there's a problem with the engine that you need to get checked out. But in the analogy, if you took a piece of black tape and covered the light, now the problem's gone, right? That's similar to when you're in physical pain and you just medicate it. Now, I'm not saying pain medication doesn't have its place. I think it does, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the pharmaceutical industry. I think pain medication definitely has its place. If someone's really struggling to sleep, for instance, because of pain, that there'll be a time when that might be a wise choice, as an example. Um, so yeah, it is really, and I know it's tough. I know it's tough for people in pain. And listen, I've experienced pain for 2 years when I had my back injury.
Yeah.
I'm not talking, I'm not a talking head. I'm someone that's been there. I know it's not easy, but it is worth getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
It's worth it. And actually, everybody in your life will actually also pay, they'll also benefit from this practice,
Mm,
right? Because when you're able to hold this discomfort, then you're less reactive. And when you're less reactive, everybody in your life benefits from that.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
I guess in a way we've been talking a little bit about internal language, right? So how does the internal language that people use, the way they think and talk about their pain, actually reinforce or perpetuate the pain that they're feeling?
Oh my gosh. When you think about it, I think that we speak worse about ourselves than we do about anybody else in our life. We're constantly like second guessing ourselves, denigrating ourselves, putting ourselves down, being disappointed with our efforts. And it's a running stream of consciousness in the back of our mind. While on the other hand, we're trying to do all of these things and excel in all of these ways, but we're not paying attention to the backdrop of our language. And we don't actually realize that language has so much power. And I think a lot of that has to do with so much hyperbole in the world today and so much extreme language all around us that we've become a little bit immune to the power of words. And it's really, really powerful because I think that we create our own reality. When you say to yourself all the time something, you will always see that. Like if all I see is people are going to take advantage of me everywhere I turn, then everywhere I turn, people are taking advantage of me.
Mm,
And then that serves to reinforce my belief that everybody's always out to take advantage of me.
mm,
And instead, if I look at opportunities all around me for people to be giving, then all I'll see are people who are giving. And that'll reinforce my idea that giving people are all around me. And I think it's the same way internally, right? Like if we say to ourselves, I can never ever like say no to the Twinkie. Then every time that Twinkie's there, you don't say no to it. And then that reinforces your idea of like you're never able to say no to the Twinkie. And
mm.
so it's like we don't really recognize that we create our own reality. And we create our own reality from the stories that we tell ourselves and the running monologue that we're always like in. And starting to do a pattern interrupt and recognize like what it is that you are always saying to yourself and how you're bringing that into reality in your like lived real life, like that. I Every time I talk to my sister, she triggers me. I can't talk to my sister without getting upset. And then sure enough, every time you talk to your sister, you're
Mm,
upset. And it's like, so I think like it's super subtle, but it's incredibly powerful. And it's just something that's also another thing to start to pay attention to. These subtle things have a lot to do with why you have chronic pain.
yeah. I mean, this isn't something that I've seen, but I've heard other practitioners say things like, oh, yeah, I was working with this person and they kept saying, oh, so and so's a pain in the neck. And where was their pain? It was in their neck, right?
Yes.
Or so and so's a pain in the ass. And they might have had, hemorrhoids or something, right?
Yeah, right.
I've not, It's not something I've seen, but other people I've heard say that. Quite a lot of people I've heard say things like that. Um, Here in the UK, some things I hear people say quite a lot is, oh, that's just my luck, right?
Yep.
Something goes, oh, that's just my luck. So it's almost like they're expecting something to go wrong, you
Yes.
know? And it's interesting because just recently, I say recently, last 3 or 4 months, I've been really into trying to have an attitude of gratitude as much as possible. And I've kind of been making myself laugh a little bit recently because if something like, I think before we started recording, I mentioned how bad the weather is here, right? Which we're English, we're famous for moaning about the weather. But what I've started doing, if I feel myself doing something like that, to say to myself, yeah, but what part of that can I be grateful for? Right. So we've had so much rain the last 3 or 4 months. But if I catch myself saying, oh, no, it's raining again, I'll say, but I'm really grateful that it's raining. Imagine if we didn't get any rain for 3, 4 months. Wouldn't life be terrible without water? Right? And it's amazing how it just flips your mind around very quickly. And what's really interesting, the last 3 or 4 months, I've had the most amazing things happen, like positive, like business has just like really taken off. Yesterday I got a little message from my publisher. They'd just done a deal in some country and they're going to be sending me this check with quite a lot of money in it. And I just think, wow, before those 3 or 4 months, none of this stuff was happening. And all I've done is I wake up every day and I just say things like, think, right, what can I be grateful for today? I've got eyes, I can see, right? I've got ears that can hear. I've got legs, I can walk, right? I live in the countryside. It's beautiful. I can walk 7 minutes to my gym, 10 minutes to my local tennis club. I've got a car. I can travel, right? There's so much we can be grateful for, but yet most people don't see it. I've got a roof over my head. I'm warm. I've got food. I've got good quality food in the fridge. I've got good quality water, right? There's so much to be grateful for. But just as human beings, we can naturally get so negative. And that's because that is how we're hardwired. We are hardwired to look for danger. That's how we survived, right? But I don't see any saber-toothed tigers in the south of England, right? So I don't need to be that vigilant. And just one of the ways that I've helped flipped, a lot of things in my life in the last 3 or 4 months is just waking up every day. And when I go to bed, I just think, I think, what can I be grateful for that happened today? And it might be, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to people like Christine on my podcast, or grateful for the opportunity that I've got, quite a busy clientele that I'm able to help, right? And they trust me enough to help them. And, I'm fortunate enough that I've got a body that I can go to the gym and I can work out, right? There's so much to be grateful for. And I know it's difficult when you're in a bad situation to come round to that way of thinking. I'm going to come out with another cheesy quote, but every journey starts with a small step. Every week, I meet people who've been told their pain is just aging, just wear and tear, or something they just have to live with. And almost always, there's a deeper cause that's being missed. Gut stress, emotional load, sleep disruption, food sensitivities, poor breathing patterns, movement imbalances. And when we look at everything together, the picture becomes clear. If you feel something important has been overlooked, book a discovery call with me at bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. That's bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, and I think that what's so empowering about what you said is like I definitely live the exact same way is because I do believe that your words are powerful and I do believe having an attitude of gratitude is absolutely like the foundation of all good things. But I do also think that when we are at the bottom and we feel like everything is really difficult for us, right? We're in a lot of pain, we're in a lot of dissatisfaction in our life. The thing that you have at the very end of the day is you have self-control. You have your own mind. You are in control of that. Maybe you're not in control of your job or getting the raise or the relationships, or you feel like your body is betraying you. No matter what, at the end of the day, you have your mind and you have your relationship with your mind and your relationship with your body, and that is within your control every single day and every single moment. And I think like a lot of times people don't realize that we give so much of our control away. We're disempowered in so many different ways, and we don't actually recognize our disempowerment.
Mm.
Um, and we only see it as like dissatisfaction with like our life, but the dissatisfaction in our life as a result of the disempowerment that you feel. and you feel disempowered, and then you don't feel like you're able to make change. And at the end of the day, you can always make change because you always have your mind, you always have your mindset, even if you have nothing else. And maybe that's the place that we all need to begin, no matter what you have. You could be living in a life of abundance, but actually be completely miserable and a lot of pain and have a bunch of diseases. But it really all depends on your mindset and wanting to take your power back and living your best life.
Mm.
And I think it starts with your mindset at the beginning, when at the end of the day, no question about it. The people
Yeah.
spend all this money to come to you and say, fix me, fix me, fix me. But if they go home and they hate themselves every day, it doesn't really matter. You're never going to be able to fix them.
Mm. Yeah. I was just thinking about what I was saying just then, and I'm thinking, someone could be watching or listening to this thinking, yeah, but it's all well for you. You're not in pain, right? And I understand that. And if someone's thinking that, what I would say to you is just start with one thing that you could be grateful for. Just
One
start with
thing.
one. And if you've got eyes that can see, you're better off than a lot of people because there's a lot of blind people out there, right? And
Mhm.
if you can be grateful that you got eyes that can see, maybe you can also be grateful that you've got a tongue that can taste food, or you've got a nose that can smell, right? Or you have a bowel movement every day. You can be grateful for that because a lot of people don't, right?
Yeah. There's
So
always something to be grateful for.
there's always something. And that's,
There's
you know,
always something.
and if you start with one thing every day, you'll be amazed how you can start to see more things in your life that you can be grateful for. And that's going to really raise your vibration.
Mhm. Yeah.
So in the work that you do, what kind of role would you say trauma or unresolved emotions play in creating or maintaining what you might call the pain body?
I think it's everything. I mean, I know for my own path, and then watching so many other people, that once you start to unlock what that really means, well, first you end up having a great deal of awe and respect for your body and everything that it's held for you without you knowing it. A lot of us don't have a relationship with that on purpose, right? That's kind of by design in a lot of ways. And it's the beauty of our design to keep ourselves safe and functioning in the world. But it also can at a certain point become our detriment. And I think that there's definitely a lot of awareness being given to, it's almost like the zeitgeist is changing a bit around our understanding of how the nervous system plays a crucial role in our well-being. And I think though what's I'd like to see changing is more and more people being empowered to make some of these changes in themselves or seek other people who can hold space for them as these traumas unwind from their system. Um, because like for example, you can go and get like somatic experiencing or there's a number of different modalities
Mm,
that help like extract the trauma from your system. But I deeply believe that if we don't have the capacity to hold the experiences that come through our body, because you will revisit those feelings as they leave your body. You will feel them, the anger, the sadness, the betrayal, the fear. You will, if that's just part of it. It doesn't last forever, but you will feel it. And if you're not able to hold space for yourself to feel it, and you're always afraid to feel these things, then it's like then you re-traumatize yourself. And that's why I really go in first with not necessarily going to like extract out those traumas, but to rather build this space for you to be able to have the resiliency to hold what actually comes through. And then recognizing it's like our nervous systems are like a coiled spring and they're so tight that every little thing disrupts it. And we want to uncoil that spring so that there's a lot of bounce and a lot of give in our nervous system. But you want to do it in a mindful way. We don't want to just like let the spring go and there's everything goes crazy. But how can we hold space? And so you have to set yourself up for that. And so for me, I like to work with clients first, like you have to be able to hold all that you are and hold your entire life experience. You are the one to hold yourself. And so we work on learning how to do that first. And then when your body trusts you to be able to hold all that is, then it starts to release naturally on its own the things that it wants to release. And we don't even need to go into what that is and why and what that meant. It doesn't really matter. So,
Do you have any view on why or how emotional trauma can create or maintain pain in the body?
how or why?
Mm,
I think because we embed it, we don't acknowledge it. We don't have a way to feel it. We don't have a way to process it. Like in our society, we do a lot of bypassing. We do a lot of like pushing down, pushing away because we don't have the awareness, nor do we have the space. And also, a lot of times we don't have a person in our lives who can hold space for us to process the things, right? There's a lot of people like you could be in all kinds of loving relationships, but if they don't know how to hold an emotional space for themselves, it's hard for them to hold an emotional space for you without it meaning something about them,
mm,
right? And so this is where we get into a lot of like, well, but my spouse is like so great for me. It's like, well, yeah, but like they have their own challenges with holding space for other people's emotions, right? Without them being triggered or without it meaning something about them, right? So it's definitely a big practice, and this is why I think it's so beautiful to have a partner in your life, a coach or guide. I consider myself a guide because I'm only holding space for your process to unfold organically and naturally, because everybody's going to have a different process. I don't have an agenda. I just hold the space for your own experience to unfold and one of safety. Because then, if you know you have a place to process all of this in a safe way, then you become better at processing as they comes up, and you'll become a better vehicle for other people to process their stuff with you because it doesn't mean anything about you. And you feel safe enough in your own body and safe enough in your own self knowing that you can hold space for somebody else to experience their big emotions without it triggering you,
mm,
you know? And so I think it's the biggest gift that we can give ourselves is to learn how to do this for ourselves. And by by extension, then the biggest gift that we can give other people is to be able to hold space for their emotional states as they come into regulation as well.
mm. So, do you feel the why is so the pain is there to make someone aware that there's that trauma that they need to deal with?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
So one more big question for you. How do people unknowingly create a self-reinforcing reality that keeps them stuck in a pain cycle, even when they're actively trying to heal?
I mean, I did it. I think we all do it. It's like this is why I feel like it's so important, like when you start working with the nervous system and you can find these people who can help, you know, take the relieve your nervous system of these past traumas, right? And that's super important and very valuable. But if at the same time you've created a life that's always keeping yourself dysregulated, it doesn't really matter, like you're going to go right back into the same patterns and keep your nervous system dysregulated just because that's your way to coping with life. And that looks like bringing drama in. You're always in this drama cycle. That looks like your relationship with your whole world, your relationship with your partners, with your community, with your society, with your job, with your children. um, and what type of your relationship do you have with them? Is it full of ease and grace? Or is it full of being triggered? Or do you have a disordered way of actually dealing with stress? So, a lot of times, a lot of us type A people, I know, speaking as a type A person myself, I took a great deal of pride in how much stress I could undertake without it affecting me. I didn't think it affected me. I thought that meant I was like a pro at dealing with stress, when in fact I wasn't. I just bypassed it, shoved it down, and kept on going. And so then I created a life in service of it. I had three restaurants. I had 75 employees. Like I had a restaurant, for heaven's sakes. I talk about dealing with a whole bunch of people with disordered nervous systems. And And it's like, but I didn't see it, I didn't see it at all. And until my body completely broke down and said I couldn't, I can't go on anymore. And so I think that we create our own nervous system imbalance, or like we overly consume news and the endless stream of news cycle. Like the world is going crazy right now. I don't know if anybody's noticed or not, but
Hmm.
like how do we buy into that energy field by always consuming, and then we're outraged, and then we're spewing that outrage to our community and to our friendships and to our loved ones, right? And so these are the subtle ways in which we keep our nervous system in an overdrive kind of way, and then we wonder why we have weight issues, or we can't sleep, or why we have blood sugar issues, or these are just subtle things, to say nothing of the people who have disease, chronic disease, or chronic pain.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you used the term, is it drama cycle? Did you say that?
Yeah.
That reminded me of a quote by a psychiatrist called Jerry Wesh, and
Mm,
he says, if you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis,
mm.
right? Which is
Yeah.
why I spend so long helping people set their goals.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah, yeah.
if you're setting a goal that's so big, so amazing, that if you just focus on that, you don't need the crises around you. You don't need it. In fact, you don't have the space for the crisis. You're so focused
No,
on,
no,
you know,
no.
achieving your dream. You don't need all that. You don't need all that in your life.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Great.
no, totally true. Totally true.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Christine, what's next for you?
Just helping people, man, spread the word. I just love changing the paradigm around the nervous system and helping people understand like freedom is on the other side, and a freedom from pain, freedom from illness and disease, but also just a personal sense of liberation and freedom, that you're not trapped in all of these things that you and I talked about, whether it's the way you talk to yourself, whether it's the way that you engage in the news cycle, whether it's what your belief structure is around how you can heal. Like all of this would be it could be shifted by how we engage with our nervous system. And I want to start taking it from this esoteric kind of practice into an everyday awareness for people to feel empowered to pay attention to it and really understand how important it is. And also, I think like we don't really think of the nervous system as something that's within our control. It's not like an organ that we can go and find and do some data testing on and see how it's functioning. So because of its esoteric, ephemeral nature, we don't necessarily recognize that it's within our capacity to create a different relationship with our nervous system. And in so doing, it changes everything in our entire life.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the word freedom.
Mm.
So I have a slogan
You got to end with the slogan,
that overcoming pain isn't just about healing, it's about setting you free.
setting you free.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't realize how not free we are,
Well,
actually.
yeah, I mean, I came up with that because when people come to me, they are a slave to their pain. They can't, if someone calls them and says, oh, do you want to go and do it? If you want to come and hike with me, or do you want to play tennis, or do you want to go to this party, or do you want to rally against the government in London next weekend? Right? If they're in pain, they don't have a choice. And what's choice?
Yeah,
Choice is freedom, right?
choice is freedom.
If you don't have the freedom to choose, you're not free. And if your pain is limiting your choices, you're not free.
Yeah.
So the road to freedom is healing.
The road to freedom is healing. And also to add to that, it's like what kind of healing? Because healing is for everybody. Like we came here to heal. And that's part of the human path, I believe, is healing and overcoming adversity and becoming a richer, more fulfilled person as a result of confronting both the healing process and the liberation. It's like the most beautiful, actually. It's the most beautiful thing I can even think of. Like like that is incredibly beautiful to see what we're capable of.
Mm. Yeah, and
And
I've seen
it's
miracles.
amazing.
I've seen
That's
miracles.
miracles. And
Yeah.
it's not like you've got a secret sauce or I have a secret sauce. No. The only
Mm,
secret sauce I have is I know it's possible. And
mm.
it's not just possible for me, it's possible for everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And where can people find you online, Christine? Where do you want to send
Yeah.
people?
For sure. My website, christineruch.com. And I also have Substack attached to my website. You can read all about how I feel about the healing process. And I also have some thoughts on alignment, embodiment, and nervous system restoration. That's what I call it. Yeah, you can book a call with me. We can explore your nervous system dilemmas. And yeah,
Awesome. Great stuff.
yeah.
Christine, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed it. I put a lot of pressure on
I
the
do
beginning
too.
saying I
Thank
think this is
you.
going to be a good interview. You've you,
Thank
you-
you.
you've
I
passed
really
you've
appreciate
passed
it.
the test, flying colours, A star.
Yes. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So that's it for this week from Christine and me. But be sure to tune in, same time, same place, next week on Beyond the Pain. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Pain. If this episode resonated, please follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone you know who's been struggling. And remember, pain is not permanent. With the right insight and support, you can turn it into power. Until next time, stay open, stay strong, and keep moving beyond the pain.